All right, everyone, and welcome to the Living Better podcast. I'm your host, Matt, joined today by my co-host and beautiful wife, Jodi. And today we have an exciting guest. We are with Dr. Jodi Leech. She is a medical director at the West Ottawa Sleep Center, and she has quite some credentials here, just to name a few. She's a respiratologist with an interest in adult sleep medicine since 1983. She trained in sleep medicine at the University of Illinois in Chicago under Dr. M. Lopata. She's a chief of the Civic Hospital Sleep Laboratory from 1986 to 2003, certified American Board of Sleep Medicine in 2003, former acting chief of sleep medicine at the Ottawa Hospital 2003 to 2007, and the list goes on. So what about we ask you to introduce yourself, please, Dr. Leech.
Oh, hi. Yes, I do mostly do sleep medicine now, but I come from a background of respirology, which might seem odd to somebody, but indeed, sleep apnea is the commonest sleep disorder there is. So a lot of our focus is on breathing during sleep. But sort of when you're training to be a respirologist, you sort of focus down on, breathing, lungs, brain, lungs, that sort of stuff. But when you move into sleep, then you have to sort of zoom out again, if you could think of it that way, and consider other non-respiratory issues, a lot of psychological issues, neurological issues, psychiatric issues, and a wider perspective on the person. So when I started doing sleep, there was no sleep medicine, if you know what I mean. I'm pretty old.
Wow.
So when I started doing sleep medicine, there were people doing sleep research, but there really wasn't a lot of clinical patient-doctor relationship in sleep medicine, and there wasn't really a subspecialty in that yet.
Okay.
When I went to Chicago as a respirologist, they were doing sleep research in the group, sleep and breathing research, and they wanted somebody to run their lab, and I didn't know anything about it, so I just started learning about it, and then the next year they said, okay, now you're the director of the lab. Because they didn't want to do clinical stuff. They wanted to do research. But anyway, so it's a little trial by fire at the beginning. But since I've now been doing it for 35 years, I guess you learn as you go.
A lot. You learned a lot along the way.
Yeah, and actually the whole field has really changed and developed over that period of time too. Like a lot of things that I do now were not known when we started.
Wow. Could you mention a few things?
Well, like, for example, even in respirology, when I trained at McGill how long ago was that? But anyway, finishing in the early 1980s, there was no such thing as sleep apnea. It wasn't a diagnosis.
Interesting.
It was not till 1981, 82 that people began to notice that during sleep, some people stopped breathing.
Wow.
So now I would say sleep apnea is the commonest diagnosis in respirology, commoner than asthma, commoner than COPD.
Wow.
But then we didn't even know it existed. Similarly, in the year 2000, people had understood that some people who were really sleepy had narcolepsy. Nobody knew why or what it meant. But in the year 2000, they discovered there's one little tiny portion of the brain that makes a certain kind of protein that keeps us awake. And in these people with narcolepsy, they have a sudden dropout of that sort of part of the brain that makes that protein. And just for that, they start to be extra sleepy. So like as you go along in life, other things are discovered, and then medications are discovered that help. Maybe we haven't cured things, but we can figure out how to treat things that are specific to sleep much better now than we could before all the research was done in the last 30 years.
Yeah, and
That's
it's
amazing.
yeah, and it seems like it's a subject that's has an increased interest, especially nowadays, due to the fact that people don't sleep enough. So, if we ask you as a doctor to explain to our listeners, well, we all sleep, but some people don't know why. So, why do we sleep, and what does it do for the body? Like, why is it so important to have proper sleep?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know everything about sleep either by a long shot because it's hard to study sleep, right? Because the person who we're studying is in a state of unconsciousness. So what we tend to do is either study blood levels of different things or brain levels of different things, or wake people up in their sleep and ask them what was happening. But that's sort of like, I don't know, boiling water and turning the heat off and then asking why it isn't boiling.
Yeah.
The function of sleep is obviously we all feel it's restorative, right? So after you've slept well, you feel a sense of well-being related to having slept.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But sleep is very dangerous, you know?
Mm.
If you imagine you're living in a cave with the lions and tigers around you,
Yeah.
the last thing you would really want to be doing is lying down and being unconscious.
Yeah.
Definitely.
100%.
So we spend a third of our lives doing that. So it must be even more important than we think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when we study all the hormones and chemicals that go on in sleep, we know that there are some body processes that happen at sleep, usually during the night, but not always night, of course, but in sleep. For example, some hormones only rise in the night, like the hormones that control making bones. So we think of our bones as being a very stable object, but they're not. They're constantly being resorbed and put down again. And the hormones that govern that are most active at night. Similarly, the regulation of the immune system happens more in sleep than in wakefulness. Not that it doesn't happen in wakefulness, but it happens more in sleep. For children, growth hormone is at its peak at night. So their growing or the growing system is happening more during sleep. Things like that. I mean, there are a multitude of other things, but you can see that the whole project of being asleep is important for systems that support and regulate the body, in addition to the mind part where you feel refreshed. Learning is happening during sleep. Why can you play the piano? You know, you practice the piano today, right?
Yeah.
How come you can play it better tomorrow? Is it because you practice? No, because if you practice, people have done these experiments and don't sleep, you can't play it better tomorrow.
Okay,
So
so they forget.
somehow,
Yeah.
or it goes, you could think in computer terms that it's going from the peripheral to the hard drive, right?
Yeah.
Like you're putting down a memory and then the next day you can start further ahead. You see what I mean? It's sort of a unconscious thing. And we think that that particular part of learning and education of the brain and the systems is happening in REM. Yeah. And one of our clues to that is babies spend 50% of their time in REM. You spend maybe 20% if you're lucky.
Exactly.
REM, right?
Yes.
So we don't have maybe quite as much to learn. They have to learn to walk and talk and eat and think and all this kind of stuff. And they spend a lot of time in REM. And teleologically, or at least we infer that they're spending more time in REM because they're spending more time putting things onto their hard drive and being better tomorrow, learning, that sort of thing. So lots of things are happening in sleep that we're not totally conscious of, but we all feel that if you don't sleep, you don't feel right. I mean, it's not like you can't function, but you don't feel good, right?
No.
And what is that? Don't
impaired.
feel
good.
You forget and you're not sharp.
I mean, if you go enough days, you're thinking and all that. But even if you only go, doctors go nights without sleep all the time.
Yeah.
You don't really feel yourself the next day, although maybe nobody could notice it after one day. if you go weeks on end with poor sleep,
No.
other people may be able to notice at least that you're cranky.
Yeah.
Your performance may be not up to what it is, but the things that are really lacking are things like if you're trying to do something original, if you're trying to create something, the very highest brain functions get impaired long before we can still walk to the grocery store, pick up the groceries and come home, if you haven't slept. Yeah. But can you design a new program? Can you make a work of art? Can you write a novel when you haven't had that restorative function? So the higher functions or having an original thought sort of thing is much harder to capture when you haven't slept. So there's all kinds of things going on, and we all want good sleep, but we all can't get it all the time.
No.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Definitely. So what would you say is the proper amount of sleep that someone should have, maybe just based on different stage of life? Maybe you need less when you grow older, or maybe you need more when you're younger. But what's the proper amount, and what are the damages that it causes to your body or your brain or your organs or whatever if you don't sleep enough?
Well, you're right. There is an age-specific requirement for sleep. I mean, a 10-year-old probably needs significantly more than a 35-year-old. And a baby is spending 20 out of 24 hours. It just doesn't feel like the right 20 out of 24 hours to the parent looking after them. But apart and aside from that, and people are always asking me, how many hours sleep should I get? And really, because there's just like a normal distribution in everything else, nobody can say exactly what it should be. But the answer is enough to make you feel like you've had a restorative sleep. So if you go to bed, the way I ask patients to test this for themselves, because a lot of us are sleep restricted, we're actively not sleeping enough. So if you set the wake up time, suppose you set your wake up time at 7 a.m., okay? And then you go to bed at midnight. Well, was 7 hours enough for you? Well, I felt okay, but I say, okay, so go to bed at 11:30. Will you sleep till 7, or will you wake up at 6:30? Go to bed at 11. Will you wake up at 7? You probably needed 8, right?
Yeah.
What people don't like is if they find out they're a 9 or 10 hour person, because they feel like they're wasting their time. But indeed, they are not wasting their time at all.
That's what they need.
They are getting what is needed for them. So the range is somewhere between 6 and 10 mostly, but very few people can get by with 5, although many try. And a lot of people, or a few, or some, let's call it some adults, need 9 or 10. And they will not feel restored and function well without. Now, when you ask me what's going to happen if you don't sleep, well, if you really don't sleep, if I kept you awake for 14 days straight, and they have done this to some poor underpaid university students.
Oh my God.
Wow.
If I keep you awake long enough, you will become psychotic.
Wow.
Like actually go out of your mind. Okay. But nobody does that in real life. I mean, that is with people on your case for the whole night and day, keeping you awake, because you will begin to fall asleep, right?
Yes, of course.
And if nobody stops you, you will play catch up. But that's not the usual situation. The usual situation is not that it's going to kill you or hurt your organs or damage your brain or anything. It's just going to be less than satisfactory, underperforming, under feeling good. Like hopefully we all know what it feels like when you've had a really good night's sleep, right?
Yeah.
But we don't get that every night.
No.
Yeah. But even when you've not had a good night's sleep, you certainly don't, sort of fall over and die the next day. You don't do as well. Now, if you have major medical problems, you're probably going to sleep more. Most people who are ill are sleeping.
Oh yeah. For sure.
When you've got a bad cold, what do? You go to
you go to
let's
bed.
Let's not talk COVID, but when you've got a bad cold, you lie down and go to sleep, right?
Yes.
I mean, why is that better than being awake?
Well, is it because
I
your
don't
body
know.
has more restorative function, like your immune system
Yeah. I
can
mean,
kick
that would be
in?
my
And
guess. I don't know any data on that, but
Okay.
yeah, that would be my guess, is that you're already seeking more restorative function, more immune system function, and letting the rest of the day go, because if you sleep, you will feel better at the end of it. But so if sleep is not like people fret about not getting enough sleep. Well, there's nothing worse for the next night's sleep than worrying about it, by the way.
Yeah.
But it's not so catastrophic as it might seem, but it is underperforming. Now, when you have an actual sleep disorder, that might be different, okay? So if you have, for example, severe obstructive sleep apnea, you think you snore, but in fact, you're actually stopping breathing during the night and waking up every 30 seconds and dropping your oxygen. Well, now this sort of sleep disorder is not just poor sleep, it's actually affecting your cardiac and brain performance in a significant way. But that's not just bad sleep, or what you and I would think of as a bad night's sleep, a fragmented night's sleep, insufficient sleep. So there are serious consequences of sleep disorders, but serious consequences of poor sleep or intermittent poor sleep are more in the field of, I don't feel good, I'm not feeling that I'm doing my work as well as I might, I'm not feeling that I'm too grouchy with
Don't have
my
as much
kids,
energy.
that sort of thing. Yeah, lacking energy, not really performing to your optimum. And you know that yourself. If you have a bad night, that's the way you feel the next day, and that's probably the way you are the next day. But you're not going to fall over from it. You're just going to not do as well.
Okay. And does it impair your functions? Like obviously your brain's not going to process things properly because you're tired. But I mean, things like your sex drive, for instance, will go down if you don't sleep, and your immune system will go down and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So you're just not performing optimally.
Yeah. I mean, I do think sexuality is one of the things that is most sensitive to lack of sleep.
Okay.
But you can recover it with just some recovery sleep. It's not like it's a physiologic problem of the genitourinary system. What it is a drive problem because of lack of sleep.
So for like new parents out there, for instance, new parents out there that they don't sleep, and then let's say the husband says, okay, we don't have the same sexual life because the mom is run down. That would be totally normal due to the fact that she doesn't get enough sleep, right?
Right. Okay. The last thing she would be interested in at the end of the laundry, the diapers, the kids, the money, the everything is sex. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, that's on my list tonight too. Yeah, but take away all those other things, have her have several good nights sleep, and she will be back to her normal interest in the subject, right?
Yeah.
But it's other things can be impaired too, like it's quite cross-referencing with the symptoms you would think of depression, right? Because you don't really have the motivation. Do you want to go out to a movie tonight? No, I'm too tired,
Yeah.
No, I don't feel like it. Why don't you feel like it? What's wrong with going out and socializing with people, for example? You don't feel like it because you're sleep deprived.
Yeah.
But that could also happen with a mood disorder, for example.
Okay.
And the other way around, mood disorders definitely impair sleep.
Yeah.
So those two are, co-travelers.
Okay.
Anyways, I'm getting off into disorders a little bit, but you can see that there's a spectrum of good night's sleep, poopy night's sleep, chronically bad night's sleep, and then actual sleep disorders on the other end of the spectrum, So sometimes we all have, who hasn't had a bad night's sleep?
Of course, everybody has.
Yes, and it might be apparently for nothing, and it might be related to something that happened to you recently in the daytime, or sometimes it's flashbacks to something a long time ago, or you're going through, a divorce, a bankruptcy, a death in the family, all these things.
Yes.
When the lights go out, that's when it's the most difficult to sleep, when you're having some major stressors in your life. But everybody has them at some point.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just not everybody has them all the time.
Yeah. No, definitely. And we'll get to the sleep disorders later because that's your specialty. But prior to getting there, progressively heading that direction, what can people do to increase the quality of their sleep? So would you say like doing meditation prior to bed, drinking chamomile tea, taking melatonin supplements, maybe the bedroom should be cooler,
I mean,
stuff like that?
I think, when we think about somebody's sleep, we want to first determine if there are any, what you're talking about is what we call sleep hygiene, just like the dentist has dental hygiene, we have sleep hygiene.
Yeah.
Are there any things that are stealing the person's sleep and they don't know about it? Or they might know about it a little bit, but not really believe it. I mean, the commonest example is caffeine, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Because people have bad sleep, they wake up in the morning and they take a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't seem so evil, does it?
No.
And that wakes them up. It's an alerting agent.
Mm-hmm.
It's even known precisely how caffeine works. There's a part of our brain that governs awakeness and sleep, and it's a different neurochemical than the one we were talking before. And that part of the brain is stimulated by a drug called adenosine.
Yep.
Well, caffeine is an adenosine receptor antagonist.
Yeah.
So as the adenosine builds up in your brain over a day, you feel sleepier by night. Why do you feel different at 10 p.m. than you did at 10 a.m.?
When you,
It's not because it got darker only. It's also because you have not slept and adenosine is building up in your brain. So the adenosine clicks onto a couple of receptors, puts you to sleep, helps you go to sleep. But caffeine comes in and blocks that receptor. Okay, so you don't feel the buildup of the adenosine. You don't feel sleepy. But use it enough, and you're going to also be blocking getting to sleep when you want to sleep. So some people go, oh, it's nothing to do with that. And I said, okay, stop the coffee for 3 months. They don't want to do that, by the way.
Yeah. No, of course not.
And they don't because they're using it to keep awake.
Yes. To
you know.
keep them
So
up.
anyways, it may not be true of everyone. And maybe after 3 months, there's no difference. But I would say not insignificantly, people come back and go, oh, you were right. It's just the and it's not just coffee, of course. It's tea, hot chocolate, Red Bull, all these things have the same chemical in them. Anyway, so that's like a common one that steals our sleep. And maybe it didn't start out to be the problem, but one felt it was the solution to be more alert and more with it in the daytime. But then it becomes an ongoing vicious cycle. Too much caffeine, not enough sleep. I didn't sleep. I need some more caffeine.
Exactly.
And it goes on and on, right?
Yeah.
So maybe it's to strike the right balance and not get addicted to one cup, two cups, three cups, so on, right?
And for some people, it's 0.
Yeah.
And for some people, it's 5, and it doesn't matter. So the other thing is, and you can test all these things on yourself, right? Hello?
Yeah, we're here. We're there.
We're here.
Okay, sorry, I thought I lost you there for a second.
No.
So caffeine is an example of a thing we are doing to ourselves. It's
That's
not
damaging.
for nothing that, well, could be, I mean, it's always couched with maybe that's you, maybe that's not you. Let's see. Okay. It's not for nothing that coffee beans are the second most traded commodity on world markets after oil. Okay? Yeah. When you think about that, you go, okay.
That's pretty insane.
It's not just because we like the taste. It's doing something.
It does something, exactly.
It does something. And we all know it. You can feel it, right?
Yeah,
but you like the feeling at the moment. Is it stealing your sleep at night? You can only figure it out by getting rid of it and keeping everything else more or less the same. So, yes. So, but also we have now the wonderful new electronic age, right? It's irresistible to take your phone to bed or your iPad or your iPod or whatever and continue playing games as a relaxing activity. But it's also an alerting activity. Like you finally have some time for yourself, you're going to play a silly game or you're going to look at the news or you're going to, and all of a sudden it's 2 a.m.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We've all been there.
Have you not been there? Right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And it's so much easier if you're 18 than if you're 80 to do that very thing. So not only is the electronic thing sort of an alerting function for the brain, but it also comes with light, right? It's pretty hard to have a screen without light. And you can dim it and you can blue light it and you can do this and that and the other, but it is nevertheless light going into the brain. And we've already screwed up our brains by having, Mr. Thomas Alva Edison gave us the light bulb, right? Before we had the light bulb, what did we have? Candles and gas lights or whatever. And before that, nothing. The brain goes to sleep based on darkness. And if you don't have darkness, it's harder. Now, some people can sleep through anything, anytime, anywhere, fine. But other people are very sensitive to that. Those are the people that respond to melatonin. Because melatonin is the dark signal. Okay. So when when you lie down and close your eyes and it's dark, your brain, your body produces more melatonin. Okay. It's a signal of darkness for your brain. If you were a raccoon, it would wake you up. If you're a nocturnal animal, when the melatonin rises, you wake up. If you're a human,
so it's the opposite. The melatonin wakes them up, and for us, it puts us asleep.
Yeah, but exactly. We're not nocturnal animals. We're diurnal or daytime animals. And so the melatonin says, as part of your usual fall asleep, when it's dark, when you turn the lights out, melatonin rises, you cool down and fall asleep. So that's why often melatonin is used as a sleeping pill. And I'm not against it. It doesn't work for everybody. But when it does, it's just sort of reproducing a bit the darkness for you, helping you to get into the right phase of the moon and the clock and everything to fall asleep.
Yeah. And speaking of that, like me and my wife, we're shift workers, right? So we sleep during daytime and stuff. And one thing that we discovered that made a tremendous difference was sleep masks. So we tried different sleep masks until we found one that was super comfortable. It's called the Sleep Monkey, I think luxury sleep mask or something. You get it on Amazon. So we tried a few, and that sleep mask seriously blocks all the light, and it made a tremendous difference. So perhaps that's one option that people can try if they don't have blackout curtains or there's too much ambient light. It's a cheap, it's a cheap solution other than taking melatonin
and particularly suppose your partner wants to have their light on and you don't. I mean,
that's it.
A sleep mask helps. Keeping the room cool and dark is the best for a sleep environment. But for some people, my cool is your cold, so you have to make a compromise between the partners or do something to have one at the right temperature and not the other. Women going through menopause are throwing the covers off, screaming at their husband, it's too hot, and all this, right?
Well, we found a good solution for that, and I don't know if you're aware, but we interviewed the creator of the Perfect Sleep Pad. So the Perfect Sleep Pad is a pad that you put on your mattress just under your first bed sheet, and it has a dual zone control. So basically, it runs water through those piping system, and you can adjust the temperature to your perfect core neutral temperature. So when we got that, me and my wife, we bought it. It was a game changer because I could put my side to my temperature and she could put her side to her temperature, and just staying under the blanket, it would keep us comfortable throughout the whole night. So that made a tremendous difference. And I don't know if you're aware of that product, but
I'm not exactly aware of that product. There are several things that are usually used as cooling blankets, rarely used as heating, but it could be too. So that sounds great. So it's a really
amazing product.
And also the fact that it can work for the two.
Exactly. So that was a game changer for us. That and the sleep mask seriously changed, the quality of our sleep. And maybe that's something you can talk about. So when heat rises, basically it signals your body that it's daytime, right? That's how our body are like kind of dialed in, if I'm correct. And that's what drives you.
I would say actually it's the other way around, but okay.
No, but go ahead.
Cooling helps you get to sleep.
Yeah.
And your body temperature falls till about 4 or 6 a.m.
Okay.
And then you have your adrenal gland cuts in with a shot of what's called anticipatory cortisol.
Okay. Yeah.
So like you're getting a shot of adrenaline around 5 to 6 a.m. and that it does start heating you up, warming you up, right?
Yes.
And
so what I'm saying
it's part of the whole cascade of sleep, right?
Yeah.
But the reason that's important is that cooling at bedtime can help some people with sleep initiation. So like getting in a warm bath and then getting out and cooling down from it.
Mm-hmm.
If you do a lot of vigorous exercise before bedtime, then probably you're too warm or internally too warm. So you want a cooling down period after exercise. Just like when you lie down, your body does drop. I mean, we're talking about tenths of degrees of temperature, but it does drop and it stays down till about the nadir, which is around 4 or 6 a.m. for a normal, like adult night sleep cycle. And then there's this anticipatory rise of cortisol just as the last REM period starts. So there is sort of like an architecture of the sleep at night that people talk about, whether you're in deep or in REM and how you cycle and all that. And some of those respond to heat and temperature, light, and it's a very complicated system.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we do manage to screw it up pretty easily.
Well, that's it.
Well, that's what I was saying. Like, I mean, if you're two under a blanket, like me and my wife, we sleep in the same bed, right? Our core body temperature warms each other up and it creates that heat bubble under the blanket, right? So that drives you out of sleep when it gets too hot, right? And that's what I was referring to, that you want it cooler at night because it doesn't signal your body that it's daytime. Or, if you play with your core temperature, like you said, then maybe the cortisol kicked in because it mimics that signal that it's 6 a.m., but it's not, right?
So does that product you're talking about, can you set a timer and say, at this time, I'm going to have the temperature start rising or falling?
Yes, exactly. So you can do that too. Okay. So that's even better. Yeah. If you want to drive out of sleep, or you can keep it cooler if you need more hours, whatever. But it's really amazing.
It won't be 100%, but it might be helpful for some people, right?
Yeah. Well, especially for this battle of like different core temperatures that everybody has with their spouse or husband,
Right. And it gets worse as you age.
Yeah. Okay. Apparently, I don't know, but I'll take your word. You're the doctor.
No, I'm just saying that, postmenopausal women, for example, they first they're way too hot, right?
Yes.
Because of, hot flashes, and we won't get into the etiology of that. But then when you're 70 or 80, many people are really cold all the time, right? Yeah. And you see the little old lady sitting out in blankets when it's a hot day, you're going, what on earth? But they feel cold all the time. So at night, they feel particularly cold too. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyways, so we stray a bit, but there are many things that you might be able to determine for yourself in your sleep hygiene to manipulate to optimize your sleep. Now, a lot of people are using all the electronic stuff, the Fitbits and all this kind of stuff, and it does give you a clue as to the fragmentation of your sleep, but it doesn't always tell you why. And it's perhaps not quite as accurate as they claim, but it's not bad,
Yeah. Do you recommend, when we talk about REM sleep, what is your recommendation as far as how many a person should have of REM sleep? And also, does it link to, like, I find with myself, I toss and turn a lot, and it's been like over a year. I don't know if it's because of the shift work that we do. And then I feel like I am more tired when I do wake up. And sometimes I'm like, is it because I'm not getting enough REM sleep? because I could be in bed, no problem, for 8 hours a night, but I just continuously wake up. I toss and turn a lot. So can you maybe help or give tips on people who do toss and turn a lot? And does it have anything to do with because you're not getting enough REM sleep, like deep sleep?
Yeah, I don't know that. Well, okay. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there.
Okay.
I don't know that tossing and turning or sleep fragmentation or even waking up prevents REM. It might decrease it somewhat.
Okay.
REM sleep is not what I would call deep sleep.
Okay.
Okay, so there are 3 states of being. You can be awake, you can be asleep non-REM, and you can be asleep REM.
Okay.
And the 3 of them are equally different. We only know awake and asleep because that's what we're conscious of.
Mm-hmm.
But REM sleep is a very active state from the point of view of the brain and the body, but not the muscles. So you're paralyzed in REM sleep. But if I showed you the brain waves, the EEG of REM versus wake, you couldn't tell the difference. So REM is an active state, and things like your stomach hormones are just the same as they are in the daytime in REM, things like that. When we talk about deep sleep in a sleep medicine sort of point of view, we're talking about slow wave sleep or delta sleep or what could be called stage 3 sleep. And that is what people experience as the most restorative sleep. Mm-hmm. But too bad, so sad. We get less of that with each decade. So if you're a 10-year-old, you're going to get, 40% of the night might be in slow wave sleep. But if you're a 70-year-old, you might not get any slow wave sleep at all. So over the lifespan, it decreases in amount. But somebody who tosses and turns and fragmented sleep a lot are probably not getting stage 3 very much in the night, although they might be getting enough REM. Very likely that shift work, and depending on how much you do it and for how long and how frequently you change the shifts and whether there's graveyard and evenings and days, the lot of different things. But shift work does screw up the system royally. Mm-hmm. Some people can tolerate it better than others, but I would say almost nobody tolerates it 100%. So that in the daytime, if they're sleeping after working at night, they are not sleeping as well as they would were it to be a nighttime sleep. And usually around the age of 50, people are not able to continue tolerating that very much at all. Okay. The cures for shift work are another whole conversation, but melatonin has been used, but basically it's to try and mimic nocturnal sleep as much as one can and have everything else in the life of the sleeper in the day or evening as much as they can possible, always doing sort of like anterior shifting, going days, evening, nights, and trying not to shift. Like, I don't know about your shift work, but some people are on these crazy 12 hours for 2 days and then 3 days off and then 3 days of 12 hours in the reverse. They don't get
pretty much
time
what
to
we have.
That's
pretty much what we have.
Like
That's
you?
us.
Yeah,
oh, yes.
exactly. We do 12 hours.
I don't know who designs this nonsense, but there's not enough time to shift your clock.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Maximally, people can only shift their clock like 2 or 3 hours for the next day, like jet lag, for example. You cannot, it's like that, but it's like that every day or every third day for shift workers. It's madness. And often shift workers and the unions and people choose it not for the quality of the sleep, but for the quality of the other part of the life. Like, we get so many days off, it's great, except they're direct on the
well, that's it.
off. We could do a whole show on shift work, but I can't change the world.
No.
But
no.
If there are people who listen to sleep doctors, they would tend to have as few, not 12-hour shifts, maybe 8, and try to have as many in a row as you can, so your internal clock can catch up.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I mean, there obviously are people who have to work shift work. I mean, if
cops,
you need
firefighters, stuff like that, right?
Yeah, firefighters, doctors. I mean, if you're a
too.
surgeon and you need an appendectomy at 2 a.m., they need an appendectomy at 2 a.m. If you need a cesarean section at 4 a.m., the baby's going to come. There are people who have to work, nurses,
exactly.
Firefighters, policemen. I mean, we don't want nobody policing us at nighttime, right?
But so for those people, for those people that can't change that, what would you recommend? Like they can't change their schedule. They're stuck in that for now.
Yeah, right. Well, number one, I got to say, I often recommend they might want to rethink it, the job, but they can't get out of it because they're in it. All right. Yeah. Obviously, anything else that perturbs their sleep during the sleep time, you've got to have the phone off. The family has to be alert that nobody's going to wake you up during that sleep time. Everything as perfect as possible during the sleep time. And trying to work your shift so you can at least get 5 or 6 in a row. When you have 2 and then switch off and then do 2 or 3 more, it's like just, it's like threatening your brain to be the worst it could be.
Okay.
And a lot of these jobs are also occupationally sensitive to fatigue.
Yeah.
If you're running the, 3 Mile Island thing and you're on shift work, or you're running a major ocean liner and you're on the night shift, you don't want this guy making any mistakes with icebergs, right?
Yeah.
For sure.
I mean, I'm using an extreme example, but obviously surgeons and policemen and firemen also, you want them to be on their top game when the chips are down.
Yeah.
So adrenaline can only get you so far. I don't know. There's a lot of research work in shift work and, using the masks, using everything else to make you comfortable, using melatonin, all this. But one of the first things that I don't understand why it isn't paid more attention to is the rotation.
Yeah.
And,
for sure.
the people in the field know about it. It's just they often, just like everybody else, put sleep as a second priority.
Either that or they're not really fully aware.
Pardon me?
Or they're not fully aware, like they've never worked, like let's say management of a police station would work with a sleep doctor like yourself. How can we improve the schedule, so that our officers are more efficient or what
doctors,
kind, or doctors, what kind of rotation?
I mean, it doesn't, I mean, they can look at where it's been done other ways, other times. And then you make a compromise. Like, for example, our residents, so they work from 8 a.m. and they could work around till 8 a.m. the next day, right? But now in the age of enlightenment, when I was doing that, then you work till 5 o'clock the next day, which is madness, right? But now in the age of enlightenment, the residents have a post-call day. They go home. What do? They don't go to bed. They go shopping. They do their banking. They fix their car. They're young and capable of doing it. But it's still not good for the next day's performance.
Yeah, you're right.
Yep, absolutely.
People can override the sleep system, but it doesn't mean it's good for it. And sometimes employers and employees do work out a system, and then people override it too. And that's when they come to see sleep doctors. They can't sleep. But if you're a truck driver, for example, long-distance truck driver, I see not infrequently these people, and they are caught because they're only supposed to work so many hours. But as you know, the traffic doesn't control, like if you're driving from here to Toronto and there's a problem on the 401, you're going to go over your 13 hours because, the traffic did it to you. And you can log everything you want, but you had to be awake for that period of time.
Yeah.
It's, there's circumstances, but I do think that shift work could be set up better, not perfect, but better. And then there are some people who are not sensitive to it at all, right? They can do anything they want.
Yep.
Just like some people can eat pizza and never get heartburn. Some people, can screw up their sleep schedule indefinitely and just do fine, but it's not the majority of people.
Okay.
Most people after a rigorous shift work problem are beginning to feel it, if not in their performance, in their personal life,
100%.
in their weight gain, in their irritability, that sort of thing, right? It's subtler things. Yeah. Anyway, so the remedies for shift work are not as good as not doing it.
well, that answers it very well.
Yes.
I had a question for you.
And I hate to tell you one other problem is that if you do it for enough years, even when you retire, it doesn't get better. I definitely have a lot of patients like that who, they did do shift work for 30 years and now they're complaining at 65 of, I can't sleep regular shit. I can't sleep regular time,
Yes.
And it's sort of like their clock got messed up and it's hard to unmess it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh,
Anyway,
I'm on the same boat 100%. It's tough on your days
It's
off
just,
than to go to bed at a regular.
Some people really need the regularity of the night-day period to keep their sleep cycles as normal as possible and their daytime performance and quality of life as good as possible. But that doesn't always work out in the modern world, right?
That's it.
No.
Yeah, exactly.
But I wanted to ask you.
And people can be really crazy.
Yeah.
I've had people who, not shift workers, IT workers. I had this guy, I'll tell you. For example, came in, he was wondering why he was sleepy.
Okay.
He went to bed at 2 a.m., got up at 4 and went to work and got home at midnight. I said, what are you doing here?
Hello.
You don't need a doctor. You need a mother or something. This is crazy. Why are you asking me this?
Yeah.
Well, what could I do to improve my sleep? Well, you could go to bed. How about
yes.
that?
Exactly.
He was the head of a big high-tech thing, and he had let the work take over his life so much that he was getting between 2 and 3 prescribed hours of sleep a night.
My God.
My goodness,
Why
that's
didn't
horrible.
fall asleep in front of my face? I don't know. But I mean, that's an extreme example of somebody who was not paying attention to any need for sleep. Anyway, as an example,
But for someone who doesn't get enough sleep, do like little naps. So what do you think about naps, taking a nap in the afternoon or just having a 20, 30 minute, a little rest somewhere?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are, if you look at the normal propensity to sleep or desire to sleep throughout the 24-hour day, obviously there is one at bedtime at night, and then in the morning you're quite alert, but usually, early afternoon, there is another rise in our propensity to sleep, our sort of siesta drive right then, right? So there is a normal drive right at that time. People often think, oh, if I have a heavy lunch, I can't sleep. If I have a drink at lunch, I do sleep, I feel sleepy. But there is a normal rise in that propensity to fall asleep that falls again around 4 or 5 o'clock. In the evening, you're more alert, and then later in the night, you're sleepy again. So there is a nap time for anybody. There is a need to nap more for some people who don't have a good night's sleep. The problem would be if you nap and it steals from the night's sleep. So most people recommend don't go more than 20 or 30 minutes because you may be sorry. I'm not against napping. Try it out. Keep it logged. Hello?
Yeah, we're there. We're listening to you.
Okay, sorry. I thought I heard a lot of silence. So try it out. Keep a log. Did it steal from the night? If I get an hour less sleep at night, what was the good of a 20-minute nap?
Yep, that's it.
You're right.
Other people wake up refreshed and they're really much better later in the afternoon. So I'm certainly not against napping. It's a normal sort of curve that we follow. But for some people, they're just on the edge there where if you sleep half an hour in the daytime, you're not going to get to sleep for 2 hours at night. So then you make a choice. Which one did you want, right?
Yeah, no,
but
definitely.
Napping, and certainly in the elderly, napping is much more common. They probably have less pressure to do things in the daytime, but a short 20, 30-minute nap is fine, especially if it doesn't steal from the night.
Okay.
As you
Yeah.
get older in your 7th and 8th decades, your clock shifts. We haven't talked a lot about circadian rhythm. That's why I said this might be a 3-hour talk.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Okay,
It's
so
interesting.
we all know, the age-related stuff. So, we know babies, right? They're
Yes.
asleep, awake. And then maybe a 10-year-old will sleep for 12 hours, but mostly at night, wake up at 6:30, drive you crazy. But a
Yeah.
teenager, they have an advance in their clock, a normal function, which is not very easy for us parents and teachers and other people to accept. But normally their clock would be something like 1 to 2 a.m. to noon, right?
Yeah.
And so we force them into getting up early and hopefully going to sleep a little earlier. But that's a normal function of age. And then adults, maybe 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 7 a.m., something in that range. But when you get into your 7th and 8th decade, your clock switches in the other direction. And
Okay.
it's more normal or more usual to fall asleep at 8:30 or 9 and wake up at 3:30 or 4. But they're going,
Wow.
what am I doing at 3:30 in the morning?
Yes,
I don't want to be
seriously.
asleep now, right?
Yes.
One of the reasons older people take sleeping pills.
Okay.
Now the
Okay.
quality of their sleep is, why would they want to be awake at 3:30? What
Well,
is
of
there to
course.
do at 3:30?
Yeah.
Yeah, my
100%.
grandma's
Anyway,
90
but-
something and she wakes up at like 3:30, 4 a.m. And it's like, what are you doing at
it's
4 a.m.?
perfectly normal,
Yeah.
but it's not acceptable to her, right?
Well,
So,
she just doesn't know what to do,
if
like you said.
Yeah. What do? You start knitting at 3:30? I know. But anyways, but knowing the normal life cycle changes helps a lot of people. Like, then the parents don't have to be so angry at the teenager,
Yeah.
This is something that is normal to them. You might have to work with it to get them to going to school, but it's not because they're partying all night or they're lazy bums. It's because their clock has changed. And if you remember how you feel when you're jet lagged, that's the way the teenager feels a lot of the daytime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the sleepy teen is one to be helped, not, castigated for his wild parties all night. Anyway, so there are normal age-related. I mean, when I have a parent and a teenager in my office,
Yes.
the light dawns,
Mhm.
and there's a whole different group of things they can do, but not till they accept that this is the way their brain is right now.
Mhm.
And it's going to switch when they're 25.
Yeah.
But until then, they have to work with it,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Schools in California, for example, are doing late start times for teenagers now.
Wow. So they
Wow. So
understood
there's
that.
amazing.
Yeah. They're starting school. The little kids can start at 8, but the teenagers are trying to start the teenagers at 9:30 a.m. Not
Amazing.
noon,
No.
but trying to move and not start with math class, for God's sake,
Yeah.
Yes. Exactly.
Okay, if I woke you up at 4 a.m. and told you now you have to go to school and learn math, that's what we're doing to the teenagers, right?
Brutal. Yep.
Yes.
That's
It
brutal.
is brutal, but once we sort of understand the physiology, it's a lot easier to design our lives a little bit around it. I'm not saying sleep is everything, just because it's everything to me, but for some people, they don't tolerate this, right?
No.
And some kids lose their high school because of this.
Yes.
Think about it.
definitely.
They really
Absolutely.
cannot get up. Okay?
Yep.
And that's at the time in their lives when they really need to, do their best in order to
Yes.
get into their career paths and all this.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And everybody's dumping on them because they're sleepy. Well,
Yeah.
it could just be them
Mhm.
at this
It's-
stage in their life. And they're not going to be sleeping when they're 22, but now it's all over.
Well, their brain
They
are
didn't get the
developing,
grade.
right? They're growing up. They're developing. Their brain needs more sleep.
And all
stuff
that
like
emotional stuff too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, no, I mean, they're coupled with a whole bunch of things, but one of the things is the sleep pattern.
Okay.
And similarly in the elderly, they have to know what the normal sleep is for their age group in order to either work with it, accept it, or at least, not blame themselves or take tons of medication in order to get that sleep between 3 and 8 a.m.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Madness, right?
So you kind of educate them to remove that anxiety and stress that they put on
Yes,
themselves,
right,
thinking that there's
Yeah,
something
and
wrong
then-
with them.
yeah, there's nothing wrong with you, but this is something that doesn't work well for society.
Yeah.
So now we have to work with what we could do to help you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
Bright light, for example, at morning for a teenager, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a pill. It's, you know, we're going to pretend the dawn is earlier and convince their brain to wake up earlier, that sort of thing.
Huh.
Now, there's whole protocols for doing it, but I'm just saying, you know, if you know the sleep physiology, which we know a lot more now than we did 30 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
then we can help somebody even in the normal range and certainly in the sleep disorder range.
Yeah.
For sure.
And speaking of that, I read a book called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. I don't know if you read that book.
Yeah,
but-
I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good book. And he was talking about, so this is something I wanted to talk with you. You know, there's some people that are more night owls, so they're more productive at night, and you can wake them up at 5, 6 a.m. their whole life. They'll never perform until 10, 11 a.m.
Right.
They're really slow in the morning, but they can work till midnight, no problem. Versus there is
Right.
some people that at 4 a.m., they're 5 a.m., one coffee, whatever, they're very
They're ready to
productive,
go.
but they'll go to bed at like 8 p.m. at night, like they're tired very early. So why is that? Do you think that's something that's just in your DNA or in your physiology, that you're a night owl or you're a, you know, early morning
A lark.
person?
It's
Yes.
called owls and larks. Yes, I think it is. I think,
Okay.
well, okay, so there's
That's
this
other
whole-
than the
what we just
circadian
talked-
rhythm you were talking
Yeah,
about.
that's over on top of the circadian
Yeah.
rhythm. There is a propensity to be evening person or morning person too,
Okay.
right? That
Yeah.
gets in there too. And for some reason, owls marry larks. and they're always fighting about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite amazing to me because I see them in my office all the time. So the
Okay.
owl thinks the lark is boring because they go to bed early.
Yeah.
And the
Wow.
lark thinks the owl is lazy.
It's true.
They won't
I
get up
see a
in the
lot
It's
of
so
that.
true.
I'm lucky. My wife is a
and they
night
marry
owl
each
like
other.
me.
I
Like
don't know why they don't. I guess when we're out looking for chemistry, we're not thinking about owls and larks. But I got
That's
to tell
it.
you,
like
it-
your parents.
it can be
the opposite,
just
yeah.
like the hot cold in bed. It
Yeah.
can
Mhm.
be a form of strife between couples
Well, yeah,
because
100%.
one wants to get up and get going, and the
Yeah.
other one wants to stay awake till 2. You know, so
Yep.
it is a difference that I'm sure is in the DNA. You're right. I think it's
Mhm.
genetic.
Okay.
And it's over on top of the normal circadian rhythm patterns that also change throughout life, right?
Yeah.
And some people, that thing that teenagers have, they keep that for the rest of their life too. Only some people, but a few. So
Yeah.
maybe when they're 35 or 40, they're still going to bed at 3 a.m. and getting up at noon.
Yeah.
Perfect
Mhm.
if they work in a jazz band, but not so
Yeah.
great if they're a banker downtown, right?
Yes,
You know?
exactly.
Definitely.
Yeah,
You're right.
Exactly.
You know, so like, but there are people who get to keep that. And there are people who don't want to change it either.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So whenever I'm talking to somebody, I explain this whole thing and say, do you want to change it? Because it's not going to be that easy.
Mhm.
No,
You
'cause
have
it's
to
genetics, right?
reconvince your brain.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. You have to really convince your brain and work on it every day. And what most people don't like is they can't let it go. Like we develop a protocol for how they control it, but they can't sleep in on Saturday and Sunday,
No, you're
or
right.
else it switches back to zero again.
Yep,
You know,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
that's you can imagine that fight with the teenager. Anyway, so,
Oh my God.
True.
True. Yeah.
but you know, I mean, most of us get by. You know, okay, so we were a little bit sleepy in our teens, and we're a little grumpy when we're 80. But a few people are at the extremes of all this, and then they have something that comes along, like a divorce or a sick child or
Yes.
a death in the family, and their propensity for not happy sleep gets quite carried away, and now they have chronic insomnia, you know,
Yes.
and they have to really unlearn really bad patterns of sleep if they want to succeed in having better sleep over time. But you can see how some people are a little more set up for it than other people.
Yeah. Sorry, my dogs. When someone's at the door.
Okay,
they
that's
go a
fine. I
little
was thinking,
cuckoo.
is there a dog in the house?
Yeah, we have 2 little dogs, and they're quite
Oh, okay,
curious.
okay, that's fine, that's fine. Now,
But,
animals can be another thing that steals your sleep environment, you know.
Yeah, especially, they like to sleep in bed so they can like lie down on you or take
These
some
are
space.
decisions you have to make. Yeah.
Yeah,
Do
well,
you have to get up with the dog at 5 a.m.? Do you have to, the cats like to play at night, right?
my wife loves them
Yeah.
so much, so there's no way we can put them on the ground. They have to sleep in the bed.
Oh, okay, so it's like, it's get rid of you or get rid of the dog? Is that the option?
Yeah, that's it. So you work at the West Ottawa Sleep Center. Tell us a bit more. What does your clinic do and specializes mainly in? So we can talk about sleep disorders.
Well, most sleep centers, not just ours,
Yeah.
mostly are referred patients for sleep apnea or some form of sleep apnea because that's the commonest sleep disorder in adults. But we see sleep disorder, every other kind of sleep disorder too. We see the circadian rhythm disorders, we see insomnia, we see narcolepsy, and we see movement disorders in the night, people who kick and not just move about, but have sort of regular movement problems during the night. So we see all of those. In general, it's by consultation. In fact, it has to be by consultation. So you are referred by a doctor, usually your family doctor, but it could be your cardiologist or your endocrinologist, or there's a whole bunch of things that could be interrelated with other systems and a sleep disorder. And the person is seen in consultation. We take the sleep history, just like we're talking about now, what time to go to bed, what time to get up, what happens in between, what pills are you on, are you in pain at night? I mean, pain is a huge stealer of sleep, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, so all that sort of thing. And then in general, we will do, not always, but usually we will do an overnight sleep study because many people are unaware of what is actually wrong in the night. They may be tossing and turning, but what they're actually doing is tossing and turning because they're not breathing, for example. That's the commonest. But it's not the only thing that might be going on. Whoa, thunder. And then if there is a problem of being too sleepy in the daytime, and we don't discover it based on what we saw at night, we might also do a daytime sleepiness test where we measure how long it takes somebody to fall asleep and do they fall into REM sleep in the daytime. That's less common, but we do those. And then we put it all together, talk to the person, come up with a therapeutic plan. You want to try this, you want to try that. It's always a contract, like what do you think you want to do for your sleep? And then often if we do have sleep apnea, for example, people go on CPAP, but that's not the only outcome. And then we see them after they're on the treatment and decide, did that help? Did it not? Is it worse? Is it better? How does it interact with any other medical problems they might have? So it's a medical model of management of sleep disorders. At the ROH, for example, there is a sleep clinic that is run by psychiatrists. And they would tend to see more depression and insomnia, but a lot of their patients also have sleep disordered breathing and limb movement disorders. And a lot of these things go together, One thing either causes if you have bad sleep from your sleep apnea, guess how much worse your mood is going to be the next day, So if we fix, they go hand in hand. And the symptoms are similar. And if I fix the sleep apnea, maybe I fix 30% of how badly your mood is. I'm not saying you don't have another psychiatric mood disorder, whatever, but not waking up all night cannot be helping,
no, for sure.
with how you feel in the daytime, that sort of thing. So all the hospitals in the region have sleep clinics. Ours is outside of the hospital, but all we would not do, for example, in the West Ottawa Sleep Center is somebody who needed a ventilator at night, like somebody with muscular dystrophy, or somebody who had such a bad heart that the Heart Institute was sending them, and we thought maybe some nights they might not make it through the night. We're not going to do that outside of a hospital. So most of the patients we see, we study in our own clinic, which is in the same building. And as opposed to a hospital, it's quiet, dark, and, no overhead pagers.
Yeah.
But not everybody needs a sleep study. Most people with insomnia, unless I get another clue, we manage in a totally different way and probably don't do a sleep study on. Now, if somebody's a loud snorer or their wife says they're having apneas that they can see and they feel insomnia, I'm going, okay, well, we're going to study you anyway, you know. But you know, sleep centers are everywhere now, and the reason it's so common is because the disorders are so common.
Oh, for sure. I'm
Yeah,
not surprised.
Now, you're in the Gatineau region?
Yes,
Yes.
we're in Gatineau region.
Right. So Hull Hospital has a sleep lab too.
Okay.
Okay.
It has a longish waiting list, and
Okay.
a lot of people end up going to Montreal. But you know, almost all the hospitals in the region have a sleep lab, just as we have at West Ottawa Sleep Center.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's a
yes.
lot of capacitance, or it seems like it, except, you know, it's one person overnight. It's not like a blood test, you know. I can do 500 blood tests in a day. I can only do maybe 5 or 6 sleep studies.
Mm-hmm. We wanted to also ask you if you can maybe go into detail about sleepwalking, and also something that I just learned, that there's such thing as like a sleep eating disorder. I never knew about this, but my friend told me that somebody that they know wakes up in the middle of the night, sleepwalks and goes and eats and doesn't even know, and then wakes up like, oh my goodness, I just ate a bag of chips and I don't remember any of it. Anyways, did you?
I don't know why they always pick on chips, but they do.
Right? Have you treated patients?
It's quite frequent. Yeah.
Okay.
So what's sleepwalking, sleep talking, sleep eating, confusional arousals, and in younger children, usually night terrors, are all the same variety of sleep disorders.
Okay.
Remember, we were talking about delta sleep, the deep sleep, right?
Yes.
Where you're like totally slowed and the brain is going slow.
Yeah.
Well, these disorders, this family of disorders, are I don't know how to describe it. It's a shift from deep sleep, stage 3, directly to wakefulness.
Okay.
Without going through the lighter levels of sleep, and part of the brain does not yet become conscious.
Wow.
So you're sort of stuck in two things at the same time. You're asleep and awake, and the sleep is deep sleep. So some people, it's just manifest by talking. Other people will wake up screaming.
Wow.
And be inconsolable, but they go right back to sleep and they don't remember it in the morning.
Wow.
Other people get up and start doing stuff. Sleepwalking and sleep eating isn't one of them too.
And they're not aware?
The only reason pardon me?
They're not aware, like they don't know that they're awake?
They are not aware. No. They will be aware the next day.
Yes.
Because they found the chips in the bed.
Well, that's it.
But is there a part of their brain that is aware without their consciousness being aware, so that they don't hit their head in a wall?
That's right.
They're able to cook food, whatever.
They are able to do things. It's very scary.
Yeah.
Now, most people outgrow this by the time they're 15 or 20. So a lot more children will sleepwalk than adults. Okay. But adults can do it, and they can be a danger to themselves, not just the calories.
Have you heard of that scary story? This scary story, it was a guy with his girlfriend, right? Wakes up, he had sleepwalking, and wakes up in the middle of the night, drives about 50 kilometers away to his girlfriend's parents, kills both of them, drives back and lies down in bed full of blood beside his girlfriend, and it went to court and everything. And the story was that he was never aware, and he had no ulterior motive to kill the parents or anything, and he couldn't remember anything, and it went to court. It's a crazy story, but like it went to that extent.
It's a famous case. It's true.
Yeah, you knew about it, right?
Yes, and it was in the Ottawa area, right?
I believe so. I'm not too sure, but it's crazy story.
It was, and he got off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe
but
because
I have had. Well, I think because he also had numerous episodes of lesser extent throughout his life. It wasn't like just one day he did this.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
He had a prior
Plus-
history.
Prior history of doing it. Plus, I have definitely, now I've never seen a patient that was to that extent, but I have definitely had patients who come to my office and said, Doc, I'm scared. I woke up and I was driving down the Queensway.
Oh my
My
God.
God.
Yeah. And now, would that not scare you?
Yes,
of course, because you're not aware, so
No,
you don't know
yeah,
how
yeah.
good of a
Oh
driver
my
you are,
God.
unless you're better. You're a better driver.
No,
when
you're not better. It's automatic behavior. You can do things that would be routine, that would be, you know, we'd all, you know, adults mostly drive every day. You don't get into accidents, right?
No.
So you can do routine things. I've had people go into the children's bedroom and take the baby out of the crib and put them somewhere.
Oh, my
Baby's not
goodness.
crying. They're not awake.
Then they find the baby lying down somewhere else in the room, in the
next
house.
morning.
Oh
Yeah,
my God.
Yeah.
They think
Yeah,
there's
see,
ghosts
they
or
don't know
something.
that they're doing it. So they can do dangerous things. They can be a harm. I mean, we believe people have walked off balconies doing this, right?
My God.
Oh.
So how do you
So-
prevent that or fix
Yeah,
it?
Yes.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So
instance.
first of all,
For those
it
sleepwalkers
has
who are
to come
listening.
yeah, well, no, I mean, many people just do a little thing. They get up, they walk around, they look in the closet, and they go back to bed, okay? But
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that they might not do something more. So in general, we attempt first off to make them aware that they could do something, even though they don't believe it. Secondly is to keep them safe. So they have to have a mechanism in their bedroom so they can't get out of it.
Oh.
Hey.
So something, yeah, so like, but they have to be able to get out if there's a fire, obviously, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
But so you put something on the bedroom door, you figure it out. I don't tell people, it could be a latch at a high point that they wouldn't think of when they're asleep. Could be a keyless entry, could be, sometimes you just have to put a cloth over the doorknob. And in their
Oh.
sleep, they don't figure out that there's a doorknob there.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
So then that person generally will just turn around and go back to bed.
Huh.
They also have to have no guns, knives, or sharp objects in the bed, right?
Yeah.
Definitely.
And no way that they could, yeah, because they could do something.
Mm-hmm.
And no way that they could get out a window
Okay.
or onto a balcony. You know, like it has to be locked in such a way or barred in such a way that it's complicated. So you cannot do something complicated in this condition in general. So first of all, and then of course, we look for triggers. So the triggers in adults are generally sleeplessness or alcohol or both.
Okay.
Okay. So if you're spending a long time, like 5 sleepless nights in a row or mostly sleepless nights because you're, I don't know, doing some project or something, and then you sleep again,
Mhm.
that's the time you're most likely to have deep sleep and sleepwalk.
Okay.
So they have to be more cognizant or aware of their sleep needs and sleep hygiene. And then finally, there are medications we can give
Okay.
that will suppress this. But we prefer not to give medications if keeping the place safe, better sleep, and no alcohol does it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it would often depend. If somebody came into my office and gave me that story about driving down the road, I'd be giving them medications the first day, you know.
Okay.
For
But
sure.
other
Of course.
people are doing lesser things. And so we work through it all together and see how it goes. Like if
Yeah.
you have regular sleep habits and you don't take any alcohol and everything is going fine, are you still sleepwalking? Are you leaving the room? Have you, people fall down the stairs, right?
Of course.
I mean,
Of course.
yeah, it's so easy to do when you're not with all your faculties, but apparently able to do stuff. Anyway, so those are non-REM parasomnias. The sleep eating is a toughie because it has other consequences. I've had people who are diabetic who are doing sleep eating, right?
Oh,
And they just
my.
totally throw the whole system out, right?
Well, yeah, because they don't
Because
shoot their
they'll eat
insulin.
anything in the night.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have people who are eating something that's not food in the night, you know. If you go, I had one guy who put Comet on his toast, you know.
Oh,
My
wow.
God.
It's not good.
The stuff you
Because
must
you
see
are
at the
not
clinic,
crazy.
That's a crazy job. You see all of those
Well,
things.
Well, but actually, and let's face it, before the last 20 years, those people would go totally untreated, totally undiagnosed, totally
Absolutely.
ignored, right? It would be a family
Absolutely.
joke. Oh, he put vomit on his toast. But,
Yeah.
he could put rat poison on his toast. And, it's like,
Exactly.
why is he making toast in his sleep anyway?
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah. So it is an interesting subject, but pretty fixable if the person agrees. And then they can take medication that will suppress it. But then are you going to take a medication every night for something you do twice a month?
Yeah.
That's another, sort of problem about it. But in general, it's pretty fixable. In children, it's mostly the safety stuff. We're not going to give children medications to keep them from sleepwalking, but the parents have to be aware that they could run out of the house, in the snow, right? The kids could be out with nothing on, or in their pajamas, in 40 below weather, if they don't lock the house and keep them in the bedroom.
Yeah.
So simple things can be really helpful in preventing major catastrophes. Children are unlikely to take a gun and shoot somebody, but they might very easily walk out of the house and not be able to get back in.
Yeah.
Oh,
you're right.
100%.
Yeah. Anyway.
I don't think we answered
All
this,
right.
but I wanted to know what led you to being a sleep doctor. Like, is there any, you had maybe, I don't know, whatever, sleep disorder
No, I had no
yourself?
pressing. Okay. So what really led me to do it was when I went to Chicago, my first job, and I was doing data analysis for the researchers. And, but the data was all about their sleep research, and I didn't know anything about sleep. So, you can't really do data analysis unless you know what the topic's about. So I started learning about sleep. Okay. And then, like I said, they said, okay, now you're head of sleep lab because we don't want to do it. And so, but once you get into something and it's so interesting, I mean, I find it a very interesting job. Yeah. And I just like doing it.
Well, good for you.
Yeah, and you're helping a lot of people, and you're fixing a lot of potentially dangerous issues too, or health issues.
Yeah. And you can't always fix everything 100%, but you can make it better. And also you can have the people understand what's going on, right? Because sleep is like a big black box to us until we know something about it, right? It's manageable, but it's maybe not totally fixable all the time. Depends.
Yeah. No, you're definitely right. Well, so for people who wants to be in touch with you or part of your team, because I think you're a lot of doctors working at that.
There's like 5 of us. Yeah,
exactly. So they can go to wosc.ca for the West Ottawa Sleep Center. So WOSCA.
Right.
Yeah, c.ca. Sorry. I was working night shift yesterday, so there you go. Or they can call the office, right? 613-722-9900.
Basically, it's by referral from their doctor. If they don't have a doctor, they can just go to a walk-in clinic and say, I want a referral.
Okay, so they cannot just contact you without a referral.
Well, they can contact us, but we can't see them.
Okay.
It's a referral process, right?
Okay.
So, but a lot of people, maybe 20%, 30% of people don't have a family doctor.
That's it.
Yeah.
So then what they do is they just go to a walk-in clinic and say, I want a referral to a sleep center. Yeah.
Okay.
And is this a paid service, or their insurance pays for it, or just their health card?
So it's totally paid for under OHIP.
Okay.
Or RAMQ, I mean, we see also Quebec patients, but it's, the whole thing, I got to say, the truth is the sleep study is not paid by RAMQ, but the consultation is. Okay. And in Ontario, both the sleep study and the consultation and anything we do is paid under OHIP. Yeah.
Okay.
So mainly for anybody who think they have a sleep disorder or they're having a hard time with their sleep and they can't fix it or
figure out why.
Yeah. So they should definitely go see their doctor and get a referral, right, for testing.
Yeah. And often their doctor knows a lot of this stuff too, and maybe helps them with sleep hygiene, and that's enough. But if it's not, then they move on. Just like, your doctor helps you with your blood pressure, but you can't manage it, he sends you to a blood pressure specialist. You know, it's the same sort of thing. Yeah.
So you
It's a
guys would be
level
the
up.
next step, a level up to really dig deep and find
right.
out what's the core issue with their sleep
Yeah.
patterns and stuff.
And not everybody needs a sleep study, but some people do.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And then when we watch you sleep, then we can tell, hopefully, if you sleep. If you don't sleep the whole night, then we can't tell anything. But
Okay.
most people, even if they don't sleep well, they'll give us at least an hour or two, and we can see if there's anything in their sleep that is waking them up or disturbing their heart or their oxygen or their brain. I mean, some people are actually having seizures.
Wow.
So, yeah, so some people think, oh, my wife says I move about in my sleep, and we do the study, and the moving about is a seizure. So that's not that common, but it's one of the things that we find. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's lots of possibilities of what's going on.
Yeah.
And it's our job to try and figure it out. Sometimes we need sleep studies and extra sleep studies and even home sleep studies occasionally. But basically, we're going to try to figure out why the sleep is so bad and offer some options over and above sleep hygiene. We hope that everybody who comes has already, you know, thought about coffee, cigarettes, alcohol, you know, all the regular things that might steal their sleep.
Yeah.
And then we go on from there.
Huh. Okay. Well, we wanted to really thank you for taking the time to do this interview with us today. It was definitely really interesting.
Yes.
And you're very knowledgeable. So for all our listeners here, we're going to put all the contact info for the clinic in the description of the podcast. It's going to be on YouTube and also on all audio podcast platforms. So people can be in touch with the clinic. And it was, we really appreciate it. This is what this podcast is about, bringing knowledge to people on how to improve their life, their health, their well-being mainly. So that's why it's called the Living Better podcast. So thank you so much, Dr. Leech. It's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. And if there's anything else you want to add for our listeners, go ahead.
Well, just think about your sleep and work on it a little bit.
Okay.
Word of advice.
There
That's
you
perfect.
go.
But don't think about it too much, because then you can't get to sleep.
That's it, exactly.
Yes.
Then you overthink and you can't fall asleep.
No, it's mind racing is up there with number one. But for the people who are ignoring it, they could think about it. For the people who are paying a lot of attention, pay less attention.
All right. Well, thank you so much. So we wish you a great day, and we'll be in touch.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.